This trailer had been sitting here long enough for the field to start claiming it back. The boards were rotten, the hardware was tired, and the grass underneath had apparently decided this was permanent. From above, it looked finished. From underneath, though, things were a little more interesting. Rust has a talent for making everything look worse than it is. Once we cleaned a few places back, the main rails were still straight. The structure underneath the deck was far healthier than the deck itself, which meant the trailer wasn't really dead. It was just carrying a lot of dead trailer around on top of it, and that was worth saving. But the more interesting problem was happening somewhere else. Chickens don't need a prettier building every year. They need dry shelter, protection, food, water, and ground they haven't already spent the last week scratching apart. A fixed shelter stays put, the grass doesn't. So what if we stop moving the chickens back to the house, and move the house to the chickens? The easy version was obvious. Build a shelter on the trailer, then tow it with a tractor every day. Perfectly reasonable. Which is probably why we didn't do it. If we were rebuilding the thing anyway, why couldn't it move itself? Not fast, not far. Just far enough to find tomorrow's grass. Before turning an old trailer into anything clever, we had to remove everything stupid enough to fail underneath it. The rotten deck came off, then the rails. Then years of brackets, wire, and hardware whose original purpose had become mostly archaeological. Eventually, there was nowhere left for the trailer to hide. And then we nearly made the most obvious mistake in the whole build. We started laying out a floor. It seemed logical. It's a shelter. Shelters have floors. And then we looked underneath it. If the whole point was giving the birds fresh ground, covering that ground with plywood made absolutely no sense. So we saved ourselves some lumber. The ground became the floor, and once the floor disappeared, the rest of the design changed with it. We weren't building a little barn on wheels anymore. We were building a roof, walls when the weather needed them, and just enough structure to carry everything else. The less this looked like a tiny house, the more sense it started making. Then came the part that turned an old trailer into something much stranger. The original wheels were designed to follow something. These needed to do the opposite. But speed was never the goal. This thing wasn't going down a road. It only had to move across pasture, slowly enough that moving it felt almost boring. And boring is good when your building has legs. For a while, everything was going suspiciously well. Then we added the things the structure actually had to carry. Batteries have weight. Water has a lot of weight. Feed doesn't exactly float either. And we'd managed to put too much of all three in the wrong place. Nothing broke. The machine just sat there, looking disappointed in us. One side was carrying more than it should. The balance wasn't terrible, but it wasn't something we wanted to discover again after the machine started moving. So part of the day's work came back off. The battery moved lower and closer to the center. The water moved. The feed moved. And suddenly the machine looked a lot less unhappy. That's building. You don't always fix a problem by adding another part. Sometimes you fix it by admitting the last part went in the wrong place. Then came the solar system. And this part is easier to misunderstand than it looks. The panels on the roof don't really move anything. Sunlight is inconsistent. Motors are less forgiving. So the useful part happens in between. The panels spend the day putting energy into the battery, and the battery waits until we ask for it back. That stored energy runs the controls, the basic electrical systems, and when it's finally time to move, the drive motors. Most of the day, this machine does absolutely nothing. It sits in the field. The chickens scratch around underneath it. The battery charges. And that is kind of the point. Because the technology isn't really the useful part. The useful part is what the technology allows us to move. The barn doesn't need to carry the ground. It carries everything the ground can't provide. Clean water, feed, shade, protection from weather, and a boundary between the flock and whatever might be interested in joining it for dinner. The grass comes free. We could have made the controls complicated. We didn't. Tell it when to move. Tell it how far. Watch the battery. Stop if something isn't right. That's really all we needed. The chickens don't need an app. We do. But before asking an animal to trust something we'd built, we wanted to trust it ourselves. So the first movement test was empty. No chickens, clear ground, nothing near the wheels. Every individual part had already worked on its own, which was comforting. Right up until the moment we had to make all of them work together. The motors engaged, the wheels started turning, and the whole structure moved, very slowly, exactly as planned. No drama, no speed, just 6 feet of grass. And somehow, 6 feet felt pretty good. Then came the test that actually mattered. This time the chickens were underneath it, standing directly on the pasture, scratching, pecking, looking for bugs, basically ignoring months of engineering around them. And when the shelter began moving, the strange part was that the chickens didn't really go anywhere. They kept scratching. They kept looking for bugs. They kept being chickens. It's everything around them that moves. The shade moves, the water moves, the feed moves, the protection moves. And underneath all of it, yesterday's ground becomes today's fresh grass. That's really the whole idea. Not a robot chicken house. Not a solar-powered gadget looking for a reason to exist. Just a shelter that doesn't force the pasture to do all the moving. A few feet today, a few more tomorrow. And that might be the strangest part of this entire project. For years, this trailer sat in one place because nobody had a reason to move it. Now moving is the reason it exists. Funny thing is, its old job hasn't changed all that much. It still carries something useful. It just doesn't carry the ground with it.